Welcome to the SWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with Alex Florio, who's one of the co-founders of Swob, and he'll get into a little bit more about what he's doing now, and then we'll get into his backstory. So he comes to us with a bit of an entrepreneurial background in helping others find jobs and things like that, but would love to hear a little bit more of his journey and SWIKE along the way. So Alex, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah, for sure. So in 2017, both my sister and I started Swob. It was one of those things where for us, I think we both always wanted to branch off and be entrepreneurs and do our own thing. But when we started it, we didn't know what we wanted to do. But flash forward now, and here we are. But what we're doing now, so essentially what Swob is, it's a job app or recruiting platform that we've developed to help younger job seekers and students find work and help employers that are looking for these types of candidates. So when we first had the idea, we thought, how can we make ourselves unique and what can we do to stand out from all of the other competitors that were already out there? And one of the things that we found that was pretty surprising to us was there was nothing available to students. So we spoke prior to launching, we spoke to over 5,000 students to really learn and understand the process that they go through when looking for jobs. And we were blown away to learn that the number one way on how these students were looking for jobs was old school. They were doing what I was doing in high school, looking for jobs. They were going around in the malls, printing out stacks of resumes, handing them out one by one, not knowing who was hiring. And when we heard that, we thought, well, how can that be? How has so many things changed, yet this process has stayed the same? And that's when we thought, we want to build this out for students and make it really user-friendly and something that is relevant and something that this I guess generation of job seekers would understand. And so to even go back a little bit further, so my background is in marketing. Prior to starting Swob, I was working in marketing in the industry, and when I first started, I loved it. It was I was working for an agency in Toronto, and it was everything I had envisioned. But fast forward a little while, and I was just miserable in my role. I wasn't enjoying going into work every day, and it was one of those things where I was just looking for a change. And I remember applying to jobs and going on and visiting other job boards and thinking, there needs to be an easier way to do this. It was so frustrating. And I can admit at the time I was on the dating app Tinder. And I remember thinking, what if there was sort of like a Tinder for jobs? And I remember I came home that night, I spoke to my sister about the idea, and it was one of those things where, we both never looked back. We knew we had something there. And it's funny, I always joke around, but if you had told me 5 years ago that I would eventually start a business with my sister, I would call you insane. And yet, here we are. We haven't killed one another yet. So we always joke around about that, but it was quite a journey. And it's one of those things where along the way, there's so many different things that we've learned and so many things that, that I wish I had known back then that I know now. But it's been a wild ride, and it's been a crazy journey. And working with a sibling has a lot of pros. I think a lot of people think that working with a sibling would be a nightmare, and believe me, at times it can be. But it's one of those things where we're both very honest with one another, and if one has an idea that we don't necessarily agree with, there's no beating around the bush there. So it's very open, and it's one of those things where at the end of the day, we both have the same goal in mind, and that's to continue to help support employers who are hiring and support those job seekers that are looking.
That's amazing. And I'd love to kind of go even further back, if you're open to it, to talk a little bit about like Alex as a kid. So growing up, were you always interested in marketing with how did like the entrepreneurial and the tech influences, but like, and like, did you and your sister play together as kids and stuff like that? So talk us a little bit about that and then maybe some of the influence that you had along the way.
Yeah, so Alex as a kid was, I think the saying "boys will be boys" really apply to me. I was a regular kid. I liked to play outside. I liked to hang out with my friends. School and homework was more often than not the last thing on my mind. And both my sister and I, so she's 2 years older than I am, so we grew up very close together, and still obviously very close now, even though sometimes we have our battles. But it was one of those, as a kid, I think. Like I said, boys will be boys. There was so many things, and I was sort of all over the place, and I always had so many different things that I was interested in. But for me, my biggest passion when I was a kid, and still my biggest passion, is sports.
Okay.
I love sports. It's always been my escape and my passion. And when I was younger, I always thought that I was always interested in marketing and that sort of side of business. And I always thought if I can combine my passion of sports with my interest in marketing, that it would be a really cool career path for me. And so again, when I started working, I was working at an agency that dealt with a lot of clients in the sporting space, and so it was just kind of a perfect marriage. But in terms of like HR and tech and things like that, it's not like I'm certainly not a tech guy. That whole side of the business is, you might as well be speaking another language to me. It's one of those things where I never thought this would be a space that I would enter. But yeah, here we are. And I think it was, it's funny that what was a frustration of mine when I was looking for different opportunities ended up becoming what I'm doing now. So it was something where, I noticed a problem, I was frustrated by it, and I experienced it myself, and I wanted to be the one to change it. And same thing for my sister. She also has a marketing background. She was also working in the industry, and even for her, she always wanted to do her own thing. And like I said earlier, if you had told me that I'd eventually start a business with my sister 5 years ago, I'd call you crazy. Well, I can guarantee you she would say the exact same thing. But I think it's one of those things where this sort of fell into our lap. There was an idea that we had, and we thought, let's pursue this. And in the early stages of it, especially both my sister and I not being tech people, it was kind of difficult to navigate. We didn't know how to start, what we should do first. There was so many different things that we debated, but it was one of those things where we both kind of buckled down, did the research, did what we had to do to sort of help us initially get off the ground. And here we are. It's one of those things where we never thought we would have built a tech platform or an HR platform, but we did everything we could to make sure that although we're not tech people, that we found the best people to help support us and make our vision come to life.
That's amazing. So I'd love to walk a little bit through, again, some of that journey to marketing. So it seems like that both you and your sister became marketers. So there must have been some sort of influence in that regard. Is there something in the household, in the water that the family had? Was mom and dad in that space as well? Or how did that influence come about?
So yeah, my parents are not in marketing.
Okay.
It's funny. And my father's an accountant, and my mother worked for Bell Canada for her whole career, so no marketing background.
Okay.
But it was really one of those things where it was just, I think, funny enough, and I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but we just both had similar interests in this side of business. But with our parents, it was, from an early age, they always wanted us to follow our dreams, do what makes us happy. And whatever decisions we wanted to do, or whatever we wanted to do with our careers, they would support it. And so, especially in the early stages, where it was scary to leave a job that you've worked so hard to get, that's paying you, and things are going well, to leave that all behind to start a business where you're not going to get paid, knowing that you're probably not going to see a paycheck for a long time. And you're going to be working like crazy, and for a long time you're not going to see really any results or any value from that. So it was very tough in the beginning, and it put our minds at ease knowing that our parents were there to support us and help kind of reassure that what we were doing. And we spoke a lot about we're leaving a job that's paying us, but I don't want to look back in 5 or 10 years from now and think what could have been. And it was, we both agreed, my sister and I, that, we would rather start this, fail, and have it blow up in our face than not have done it and then look back 10 years from now and see somebody else had done it and killed it.
Sure.
And we didn't take that chance. So, even now, especially with young entrepreneurs and students, it's nice to see that entrepreneurship is pushed in school. And we always encourage, whenever we meet with students or anybody for that matter, if you have an idea, go for it, because you don't want to look back and think like, what could have been. And so for us, like, that was certainly the biggest thing that was in the back of our minds, is that yes, this is a big risk on our part, but I'd rather take the chance than not take it at all.
It sounds awesome. So I'd love to kind of walk through the journey. So growing up, you were interested in marketing, and when you took your degree in university, I think you did like sociology or something like that. Did you know at that point that you wanted marketing, or was there a journey to get to marketing from there?
So there was a bit of a journey there. So when I was in high school, again, sports was still always my passion, and marketing was always something that I was interested in. But for a long time, I thought my career path was going to be teaching. I thought I would become a teacher. It was something that, I had some great teachers in high school that had inspired me and kind of made me think this could be something that I would enjoy. And so when I graduated from York, I had to make a decision. Do I want to pursue teachers college, or do I want to go and pursue marketing? And it was honestly, it was a tough decision, because like I always envisioned myself, especially a lot throughout high school and university, I always envisioned that I would be a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so to kind of start not doubting myself, but just thinking of other opportunities, it was there was a lot of sleepless nights. And when I look back, I have no regrets, and I'm thrilled with the path that I've chosen. But it was a long time where I thought I was going to get into teaching and do that. And, it's still something that, later on in life, if that opportunity ever came up where I can kind of, help and give back in some sort of way, like, that would be something that I would totally be interested in doing, because like I said, I had great people and great teachers that helped inspire me. But yeah, that's at York, I had to make that decision. Do I want to go to teachers college, or what do I want to do? And like I said, sports was always my passion, and I always had the interest in marketing, and that's when I knew this is what I want to do.
I'd love for you to kind of walk us through that decision, because I think that's an important one, where a lot of folks in the audience are ones that are kind of university bound. Sometimes they're doing it just because mom and dad want them to, right? they're supposed to become like that doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer, whatever, and they're down that path, or maybe a different path. But university is kind of that ticket out. And then for you kind of identified, I want to be a teacher. You had kind of a clear path there. So to be able to kind of pivot and say, not teacher, it's marketing in the sports area. So what kind of flipped that decision, or what was kind of the process you had in order to make the decision? And then like after the decision was made, was it just kind of like didn't look back, or was there like doubts that creeped up along the way? Because I know some people are at that kind of the fork in the road and they're looking to make the decision. So help them do that, and then and then we'll go from there.
Well, like I said, I always knew that there was an entrepreneurial kind of bug in me. And one of the things that I always thought about was, if I go to teachers college, then that, it would pretty much be the end of, ever going off and doing something on my own. And, again, like I thought teaching would be such a great career for me. And, it's something like I enjoy speaking to people. And so I always thought I would do really well as a teacher. But it was, again, it was just so many different factors where, again, sports being my passion, that combined with the interest in marketing, and that combined with I eventually want to one day do my own thing and be my own boss. I just thought that if I decided to pursue teachers college, then that entrepreneurial sort of dream that I had of eventually starting would probably never really ever be, would never come to fruition. So there was some nights where I thought, did I make the right decision? And there's certainly some nights where there was doubt. But I mean, looking back on that now, I'm happy with the decision that I made, but I mean, it was one of those things where for a long time, you kind of wondered, was this the right call?
Right.
So, it's something that I think we all experience. And, especially graduating from university, it's just, that experience went by so fast where it's like, I remember my very first day of university thinking, okay, like I got a lot of time before I have to worry about, next steps in the next phase of my life. And then, before you know it, in a blink of an eye, the experience was over, and it was like, oh my goodness, like I need to now really decide what I want to do with my life. And it's tough at that age when you're faced with that decision, and there's so many other influences around you, kind of trying to guide you here or guide you there. And it was one of those things where like I just had to listen to myself, go with my gut, and ultimately, what the biggest factor was what would make me the happiest.
Right. So it sounds like that it was kind of thinking about the two options, so teachers college or not, and you felt that teachers college would be a little bit more limiting because you had that interest in sports and in marketing, in entrepreneurship, and all that sort of stuff. And if you're a full-time teacher, that's probably less in the cards for doing that. So the decision is more keep your options open is one of those things, and not limit yourself. And can you, or do you have a time when you had already made that marketing decision and thought back, as you mentioned, like, is this the right decision? Like, how did you overcome that? Or I don't know, did you overcome it, or did you just kind of let it go? Or can you describe one of those moments?
I think when I made the decision to pursue marketing and do all of that, it was, similar to like when we started Swob. It was just one of those where I never really looked back on it. But I mean, I was, when I started working in marketing in the industry, working for an agency in Toronto, like I said earlier, it was one of those where when I started, it was kind of everything I had envisioned. It was everything that I had hoped for. And then fast forward a little while, and like I said, I was just miserable. So I remember having those days where I'd go into work just being absolutely depressed, being miserable, just not wanting to be there. And that's when I would think, was this the right decision? And it sort of would creep up in the back of my mind. And I don't know if that's because I had a commute that was over an hour with 2 different trains where I was exhausted physically and mentally, and not looking forward to that part of things. But in the back of my mind, I did also always tell myself that this wasn't the long goal or the long-term goal, and this wasn't sort of where I'm going to be in 5 or 10 years from now. So that's sort of what I hung on to, was knowing that I am eventually going to do something on my own. This is the reason why I chose this path, and it was just a matter of what I'm going to do.
That's awesome. So it sounds like that while making the marketing decision, it wasn't really that kind of regret. It was more like, now I actually made it and I'm doing the stuff that I love. It's like, oh man, but this wasn't what I thought it would be. So can you walk us through kind of the time period when you got that job marketing? This is awesome. This is exactly what I wanted. It's going according to plan. And then kind of that, I guess, the gradual decline, because a lot of folks suffer on that, like death by 1,000 cuts, where it's not it was great and awesome, but then slowly it kind of recedes. So, and then what was kind of the tipping point for you to do something different? But yeah, walk us through that journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it's funny, when I graduated from college, where I went after York, I was one of those people that spent so much time trying to get my name out there. I spent so much time networking, doing informational interviews, and I would often joke around with a lot of my classmates saying, looking for a job is a full-time job. So I would literally, like, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, I'd be on the phone sending out countless numbers of emails, trying to set up interviews and different things like that. And so for me, that experience doing all of that was beneficial, because when I got hired, it was sort of a fluke. There was somebody, I remember I had gone for an interview, and for whatever reason it didn't really pan out, and so they knew who I was, though, and it wasn't because I did a bad interview or anything like that. They decided to pick another candidate, which was, that's fine, that was their decision. But it had worked out because all of that networking sort of made them know who I am, and then my name was in the back of their heads, And, it was funny enough, this person that they hired didn't work out, and they had reached out to me saying, hey, we have an opening. We want to bring you in for an interview. Are you interested? I said, yeah, for sure. And so I went in, got interviewed, got hired. I was ecstatic. And, so I would say this was all probably, in terms of a timeline, probably late summer of 2016. So, I started there, I was working, and then I would say it started to kind of go the other direction, probably around late winter. So I guess late February or early fall of 2017. And that's really when I started, work wasn't fun for me anymore. And that's when I started looking for other opportunities. And again, it was one of those things where just through that frustration of looking for other opportunities, it led to what I'm doing today. So in a way, I'm grateful that I had that experience, because if I didn't have that experience where I went into work every day feeling miserable, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. So looking back on it, I like I said, I'm grateful for that experience, and I'm glad that it happened. And part of me wants to go back there and thank some of the people that I used to work with, who who didn't make it too much fun. But I mean, yeah, it was, once the idea was there, and it's funny, I remember being, I remember just sitting there having this idea, Tinder for jobs, and I had a little sticky note next to me, and I just remember writing that down, Tinder for jobs, on a little sticky note, which I actually have, with me at my desk. And, it's something that, it was like, looking back on that, I never knew that, what that little idea was at the time, that it would evolve into this. But yeah, it was, I'm like I said, I was grateful for that experience. And, I always encourage, and I hope that other people who are like myself, who, had ideas or had other aspirations, that they do sort of follow their path. Because like I said, it's, the biggest risk is not taking one. And I didn't want to look back and be miserable. So I remember, when we left our roles, which was probably around April of 2017, that's when, we both knew, my sister and I, like, this is what we're going to do full time. We're thankful that we have the support of our parents that are there to help us out. Let's, bootstrap this, build something, the two of us, and, see where it goes and learn along the way.
That's awesome. So it sounds like that quote, like, turn lemons into lemonade type of thing, where you took some of that frustration to the point where you're almost thanking the folks that were there. It's like, I'm so glad you made me miserable, because it led me to where I am now. But so if we go from the sticky note, the idea, you have the Tinder for jobs there, and then the kind of decision to kind of leave it all for this kind of crazy idea, right? So what is like the conversation with parents or the folks closest to you seem like? So obviously you and your sister are kind of tag teaming, saying, okay, yeah, this is a good idea. But then everybody else must have been like, oh, you're out of your mind, because this is not safe. There's so much risk and all that sort of stuff. What sort of like obstacles or challenges do you have on that front? Or was it pretty easy to convince folks? Because you're both marketers, so you guys are awesome at that.
I remember speaking to my parents, and me being who I am, jokingly said, I have this $1 million idea, and my parents thinking, okay, I hear ya. But when I explained the idea and what I was thinking and sort of what I envisioned, it was one of those where they were like, okay, this is actually kind of interesting. This it's not a dumb idea that we get expected from you. It's something where this actually could be something. So we're grateful that they were super supportive early on. But one thing they did make sure was that know the risks, know that there's a lot of sacrifice that's going to have to be made, and a lot of sacrifice that you're going to have to put into doing your own thing. But for them, I think they both knew that my sister and I always wanted to do our own thing, and I don't think they ever thought that we would do our own thing together.
Wow.
So I think that was something that really I think it made them happy, and I think it was something they were proud of, at the fact that, here's my sister and I who came together and wanted to do this together. So they were very supportive of that. They still are very supportive, and especially in the early days when there are doubts and there are times that you can get low on yourself. They were there to say, like, no, like, get back on the horse, make sure you're doing your thing, make sure you don't get too high when things are good, don't get too low when things are bad. And just keep doing what you're doing, because if you believe in what you're doing and you're passionate about it, you'll eventually get to that point where you want to be. So yeah, I think for them, knowing that my sister and I wanted to do this together, and that also wrapped around with the actual idea itself, I think they felt comfortable knowing that this is something, if they want to pursue it, then do it. And I think very similar to how we thought. It was, they thought if it blows up and fails and doesn't go anywhere, at least you took the chance.
Sure.
And one thing even I thought about as well, like, when we started this and thought, there's a chance that this doesn't work. And I thought, okay, like, this could look good on my resume, seeing, putting down here, like, I started this business, I've done X, Y, Z. So that was always something I thought of too. That it's funny. I always joked around with some friends of mine that I'm probably more employable now than I've ever been, because there's, like, every aspect of this business, it's like I'm involved in it some way or another. So yeah, I mean, we were just so grateful to have the support that we had, and still are grateful for the support.
That's amazing. So walk us through some of the early days. So you have the ideas, now your parents gave you kind of their blessing, so to speak, but neither of you are in tech, but you build a platform. So what is that journey like? So do you move into your parents' garage type of thing and go through that, or like, how do you pay for coding and development, because you didn't do it yourself, right? So what is that process? Because I know there are a lot of folks out there with ideas and they want to do it. If only I can get like find a tech co-founder to build it for me. Is that the route, or is there a different way of doing things, or at least from your experience?
So when we first started, we're set up a little office space in mom and dad's basement, and that's where we worked for a long time. And it's funny, like, we moved all over my parents' house, whether it was in the dining room, the kitchen, the basement, wherever. It's like we almost just kind of took over. But again, not having a tech background, we more thought of it in the beginning of, okay, the marketing side of things, like our branding, the logo, the name, our colors, even.
Sure.
What would we do with what would we do with all of that first? But fortunately, for us, my sister had a friend, or has a friend, who's a graphic designer, and where he was working, they built a lot of different kind of tech platforms, and they built a lot of different prototypes. So it was, he kind of told us, hey, reach out to this group, they can kind of help you. And so we had reached out to a prototype agency, and they're based out of London, Ontario. And from there, we set up a meeting with these guys, not really knowing what to expect, because it was the first time that we had ever kind of done something like this. But my sister and I came into this meeting very prepared. We knew what we wanted. We knew how we envisioned everything to look. And it was just, how can we relay our message and what we're looking for to these guys to a point where they'll understand what we want and actually build it out for us. And so we met with this prototype agency. It was great. And they took our idea and made it exactly what we were looking for. Like, they literally took, like, how I envisioned it in my mind is what they showed us. And it was funny, whenever I meet with young tech founders or young people who want to eventually start something in the tech space, I never knew this early on, but getting a prototype built first before actually building out the app was something that saved us a lot of headaches, a lot of time, and a lot of money, quite frankly, because it was a lot easier to make changes as a prototype than it would be to make a change with something that's actually built and developed and live.
Sure.
And it's funny, like, when the app started, even our website, there are so many changes that we've made that maybe you might not notice, but tons of subtle changes and updates that we've made to make sure that it's the best that it can be. So evolving the technology is something that we are constantly doing. And then once the prototype was built and it was in a space or in a spot that we felt we were really comfortable and happy with it, from there, finding a developer was something where, again, how the heck are we going to find a developer to actually build this for us?
Right.
There's so many different angles, there's so many different ideas being thrown your way. Outsource it to India or outsource it to California. And I remember looking at different developers that can do this type of thing, and just being terrified of what I was seeing in terms of costs and things like that. But luckily for us, the agency that we had worked with knew a bunch of developers that they had worked with and trusted, and they were able to make introductions for us. And from there, we had met with a few developers. We explained what we were looking for, and once we found the developer that we were happy with and comfortable with, we went with him, and he's been a part of our team since day one. And one of the things that we were looking for was, because our developer is contract, he's not a founder or anything like that. So he's free to go and do other projects, but I would say his biggest project is Swob. And we wanted somebody that whenever we had an idea, if he didn't agree with it, or if he thought it could go another direction, we wanted that pushback. We wanted somebody to say, well, have you thought of doing it this way instead of this way?
Right.
And, that's one thing with our developer is he is, first of all, he's fantastic because he's local. I know that if there's any issues, I'm able to get a hold of him right away. So he deals with a lot of that. But there's ideas that we've had that we talked about with him, and he's pushed back. And so for us, it just gave us that peace of mind knowing that this guy is as passionate about this as we are. And if he's putting his name on it, he wants it to be the best it can be just as much as we do. So that for us really gave us peace of mind.
That's amazing. So, and obviously he's not free because he's not a founder. So you had to pay for him. Was that kind of savings that you had from your old jobs, or did you do something along the side in order to pay for it, or did you win a bunch of checks behind you before that? So how does that come to actually putting it in and making a true working app?
Yeah. So bootstrapped. We kind of took advantage of the fact that we had some money saved between the two of us, and so that certainly helped out. And then there was other, tons of other things that we looked into for the help. So different government grants we applied to. We were always applying to different pitch competitions and trying to get involved that way, see if we could win some money that way. So we were fortunate that between my sister and I, the different competitions that we had won and the different government grants that were available, it was enough to help us get everything off the ground initially.
Sure. And what would you say for those who are kind of in the same boat where and maybe they're not the marketing types, they have the idea, because it seems like that works to your benefit, because that obviously helps with the pitching and the messaging and stuff like that. If they have an idea, what would be kind of the first step that you'd encourage them to undertake to following their dreams?
Well, in terms of funding, there are so many different government grants or loans that are available to founders. The difficult part of that is there's a lot of research that needs to be done. But there are lots of different things that you can do to help kind of with the funding. And so for us, we made sure that we did all of the research and took advantage of anything that was out there. Like, it didn't matter if it was the smallest amount or something that was significant. It was if it's free money in our pocket, we will explore it. We will, do everything we have to make sure we get it. So my advice, like in terms of how to get it started, because obviously it's gonna, starting a business takes time and money. Look at the resources that are available to you. It's very redundant. It's very time consuming and can be quite tedious, but you've got to put the time in, and you'll start to see that there are things available to help you.
That's amazing. So as we start to wrap things up, I'd love for you to share some of your SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier. So along the way, I don't know if it's high school Alex or university Alex or college Alex or like somewhere in between. What sort of advice would you want to share with yourself that you wish that you knew earlier in the process?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, at the early stages of this, we had put a lot of pressure on ourselves because there was a lot of people that were supporting us, and we didn't want to let these people down, especially our family, our parents who believed in us since day one. We felt a lot of pressure that we didn't want to let anybody down, and we wanted to make sure that we were managing or meeting their expectations. So, in the beginning, when we first started, and we wanted to be like right at the very top, and so whenever an employer would try us and didn't want to continue with us for whatever reason in the early stages, it was one of those things where it was like, well, why we built this out for you, what could we do better? And it was one of those things where we would get so frustrated and get so down on ourselves that looking back, I would have just told myself to stay calm, keep doing what you're doing, get back on the horse, because it's ask any founder of any business, or even in any career path, it's not always just a smooth line. There's bumps along the way, and it's how you deal with those kind of bumpy roads. That's what will determine your success or not. And so I wish, going back or looking back, that I would have told myself to just kind of keep doing your thing. Don't get too high when things are good. Don't get too low when things are bad, because I think it's important to stay even, whenever, whether in work or as a founder or in anything. When things are good, you think you're on top of the world, but it could come crashing down just as quickly. So that's one thing that especially now for myself, I always try to stay even keel and make sure that when there are those bumps along the road now, how we deal with it is much different than how we dealt with it early on. But even with the good things that happen now, we're obviously happy and proud to see that this has evolved into something that's helping people across Canada and slowly now into the US. But it's just, keep doing your thing. Don't stop what you're doing, and just make sure that you don't beat yourself up when things are bad, and don't get too high when things are good.
That's amazing. So what are kind of the next steps? So I think you and I met probably at one of the conferences where you were boothing, and I thought it was an interesting idea, and we stayed connected. And although you have aspirations for this to be like $1 billion company, you're not quite there yet, but you're making headway, right? And at least there's progress. So what are some of the next steps? You talked when we were off camera, like moving into the US, and what are some of the other interesting things that we could look forward to if we're following along with Swob?
Yeah, so like I said, for us, we always want to make sure that we're evolving and updating the technology to make sure it's as strong as it can be. And for us, feedback is probably the most important thing. So for all of the different features that make Swob unique for employers posting jobs, all of those features came from us having conversations with different employers and different people in HR, and just really learning and understanding, okay, what did you like, what didn't you like, what do you want to see? And so as important as that is to us on the employer side, it's equally as important on the job seeker side as well. We want to make sure that it's as easy and as convenient as possible. So one thing that we've done, and this is something where we heard from our users, we got their feedback, and we wanted to make sure that we listened. And so one thing, and I guess unfortunately, with the pandemic happening and a lot of people who have unfortunately lost their jobs, some people, young students, when we say the Tinder reference or when we say Tinder for jobs, they know how it works right away. So there's no issue there. But with more mature job seekers, they might not want an app on their phone, and I totally appreciate that. There's a lot of I for one, ironically enough, don't have a lot of apps on my phone. So we built out on our website where now, if you're a job seeker, like any other job board, you can go onto our website, type in what industry you're looking for and what location you're in, and it'll show you a list of jobs that are available in your area based on what you're looking for, and you can apply online. And so that's one thing where, our users told us they want to see that, and we built that out for them. So that's something where, now if you don't want the app, you can visit our website and you can look for jobs there as well. So it's just another resource. And then in terms of, next steps and what we're doing, so right now, Swob is available across Canada, and it's something that we are obviously very proud of and happy that we've managed to get to a point where we are national. But now the next step is into the US. And so we've identified Dallas as an area that we want to sort of test things out first. So we're sort of in the early stages of that. And when I say early stages, I mean like literally within the last couple of weeks, it's something that we've launched and started to promote out in Dallas. And it's, it's been one of those things where we're really happy with the turnaround and the results that have been happening. There has been some traction in that area. And so for us, the biggest thing is to continue to grow, continue to make sure that we stay top of mind, and, make sure that, for us, our ultimate goal is, if the job seeker is looking for a job and their first thought is to go to Swob, not Indeed or any of the other job sites, that for us is a win. And alternatively, on the employer side, if an employer needs to hire and their first thought is to go on to Swob and post their job, that is a win for us. So we want to make sure that we continue to grow and that we can continue to support the people that we are working with and make sure we give them the best experiences possible.
That's amazing. So yeah, look forward to hearing about all the other updates, and would love to have you back to talk about things like resiliency and even marketing, because I think a lot of those things are ones that folks would be curious about understanding from your journey on the entrepreneurial side and elsewhere. But yeah, any parting words for folks, or where can folks connect with you if they're wanting to learn a little bit more about yourself or wanting to learn more about Swob?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to connect, I'm always happy to have conversations and kind of share some of the experiences that I've had along the way, because in the early stages of Swob, when things do get kind of tough, we had such great support from other people that kind of helped us, outside of our parents, that helped keep us inspired. And so if I can give back and do a fraction of what these people did for me, like, I'm always happy to offer up my time. So if people want to connect, send me an email. You can send it to alexander@swobapp.com, or if you go onto our website, swobapp.com, you can reach out to our info email, and one of us will be sure to respond and, give our time and give us the best advice that we can.
That's awesome. So thanks so much, Alex, for sharing your story and kind of some of the trials and tribulations and interesting turns that happened along the way. And yeah, we'll look forward to hearing more about your progress.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed doing this, and yeah, it was a pleasure, and thank you for having me on.
Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.